Snow is falling across huge sections of the country right now. And I don't mean just a few scattered flakes here and there. I'm talking about a true coast-to-coast winter awakening. From the eastern seaboard through the Midwest, down into the deep South, and even brushing the northern edge of Florida, winter has officially shifted into another gear. And what I want you to understand right from the start today is this. What we're seeing outside right now is not the peak of this pattern. This is only the beginning. When I pull up the national map this morning, I almost have to pause for a moment and really take it in, because rarely do you see winter stretch itself this broadly, this early, and with this kind of confidence. Snow is falling in places that normally don't even think about snow. Meanwhile, blizzard conditions are raging in the northern plains. Lake effect snow is firing up near the Great Lakes, and powerful winds are wrapping all of this together into a very dynamic and dangerous setup. So today, I want to slow this down and walk you through everything. What's happening right now, why today's forecast is especially tricky, and then, more importantly, what the atmosphere is quietly building behind the scenes for the second half of January. Because what I'm seeing in the long-range guidance right now has the potential to deliver not just one winter storm, but possibly a sequence of them. By the way, if you'd like specific weather forecasts for your region or city, please leave them in the comments. I'll answer them individually as time allows. Also, if you like the video and subscribe to my channel, you'd be very grateful. Now let's move on. Let's start with what's unfolding this very moment. Across the Midwest and northern plains, winter storm warnings and blizzard warnings are lighting up the map. In areas around Fargo and Grand Forks, winds have been howling for days now, blowing snow across open fields and turning highways into tunnels of drifting white. Visibility has been collapsing, and travel has become extremely difficult in spots. This is not just snow. This is true winter weather, the kind that reminds you very quickly who's in charge. At the same time, down across the deep South, something far more unusual is happening. Snow is falling in southern Georgia. Snow is falling in Alabama. Snow is pushing into parts of the Florida Panhandle. That alone should stop you in your tracks. These are regions that maybe see snow once every several years, and now we're watching bands come through with snowfall rates approaching an inch per hour. In some locations, the radar is lighting up so brightly you'd swear you were looking at a Midwestern snow squall instead of southern counties that normally deal with rain and thunderstorms. But here's where this forecast becomes especially complicated. The cold air is in place aloft, meaning a mile or two above the ground, temperatures are plenty cold to support snow. But at the surface, especially east of the Appalachians, the cold air is struggling to push in. Those mountains are acting like a barrier, slowing the advance of true winter air into the Carolinas and Georgia. And this is one of the hardest scenarios we ever forecast. Because when temperatures are hovering in the upper 30s and low 40s, everything depends on precipitation intensity. If the snow comes down lightly, it melts before it ever reaches the ground. You get cold rain. But if the snow starts falling hard enough, something magical happens. The melting process cools the atmosphere. The column cools from top to bottom. And suddenly, rain flips to snow very quickly. That's exactly what we're watching for today across parts of South Carolina, North Carolina, and into Virginia. Some models are more aggressive. The NM wants to flip parts of the Piedmont over to snow as the evening goes on, places like Charlotte, the Triangle, and eventually eastern Virginia. The HRRR waits longer and limits accumulations. And right now, the truth is probably somewhere in between. Temperatures are marginal, the surface is warm, it's going to take either very heavy precipitation or an influx of colder, drier air to make this work. So if you're in those areas, this is a nowcasting event. Things can change very quickly over the next few hours. Farther north, though, the setup is much more straightforward. From Pennsylvania through New York and into New England, snow is already falling and will continue through tonight. Boston, Hartford, Albany, southern New Hampshire, and coastal Maine are all lining up for accumulating snow. Coastal Maine, in particular, could see 6 inches or more before this is over. And then there's the lake effect machine. Once this main system pulls away, the winds turn just right across Lakes Erie and Ontario, and that is when the snow belts light up. Places east of Buffalo, Watertown, and into parts of northern Michigan are going to see persistent, heavy lake effect bands that can pile up snow very quickly. So yes, today is active, but now I want to shift gears. Because as impressive as today's storm is, What has me truly excited, and I mean genuinely excited as a weather watcher, is what the atmosphere is doing beyond the next 48 hours. When I step back and look at the jet stream pattern, this is where things start to come together. Out west, we have a powerful ridge anchored along the west coast and into western Canada. This ridge is tall, strong, and stubborn, and what that ridge does is incredibly important. It forces Arctic air straight south out of Canada and into the central and eastern United States. At the same time, the Pacific jet is behaving beautifully. Instead of blasting warm air across the country and destroying our cold, it's entering the west, breaking down and allowing the cold air to remain in place. And now, finally, the subtropical jet is beginning to show signs of life. That matters more than almost anything, because cold air by itself gives you frigid temperatures and wind. But cold air plus moisture, that's how you build winter storms. For much of this winter so far, we've had cold but not much moisture. Clippers flying through, quick snow showers, lots of wind, but nothing that could organize into a major system. That is changing. As we move deeper into the second half of January, the ensemble guidance is screaming one message very clearly. The cold is not going anywhere. In fact, it's getting stronger. We're talking about repeated Arctic air masses with 850 millibar temperatures plunging to -30, -35, even -40 across parts of Canada. That is extreme cold. And that cold is lining up wave after wave, ready to pour south into the United States. At the surface, that translates to temperatures 15 to 25 degrees below normal across huge portions of the country. And now, look at the snowfall trends. Over the last several model cycles, both the European ensemble and the GFS ensemble have been steadily increasing snowfall probabilities across the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, and the Northeast. And more importantly, those probabilities are creeping farther south, into the Tennessee Valley, the Carolinas, and even parts of Texas. That is not random. When ensemble means start trending upward, it means multiple individual model members are producing significant storms. And when I dig into those members, I see exactly what you'd expect in a locked-in winter pattern. Some runs hammer the Ohio Valley with heavy snow. Some bring a classic East Coast storm up the shoreline. Some drop ice and snow deep into the southern states. Different tracks, different solutions. Same message. The pattern is supportive. Blocking is strengthening over eastern Canada and Greenland. That slows the flow, forces storms to track farther south, and allows cold air to stay entrenched. The Arctic Oscillation is trending negative, a classic signal for sustained cold outbreaks. The Pacific North American pattern stays positive, reinforcing ridging out west and troughing in the east. In plain English, the atmosphere is building a winter highway straight into the eastern United States. And now we're entering the danger zone. In a good way if you love snow. The first window I'm watching very carefully is January 23rd through January 26th. Multiple ensemble members develop a wave along an Arctic boundary, with strong high pressure pressing south from Canada and moisture riding over the top. That is the textbook setup for a major winter storm. Snow across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, and Northeast, and freezing rain or sleet across parts of the Deep South. Some runs suppress it south. Some amplify it and drive it up the coast. That tells me the energy is there. We're just waiting to see how it phases. And then, almost immediately after that, another window opens between the 27th and 29th. The cold reloads. Blocking strengthens again. Another southern wave ejects. And suddenly, we're talking about the possibility of back-to-back winter storms. This is the kind of pattern that can deliver a memorable stretch of winter. Now, will every model verify? Of course not. But when you see consistency across multiple ensemble systems, when teleconnections line up, when the cold signal remains locked in for 2 straight weeks, that's when you lean forward in your chair. So here's the bottom line today. Short term, we're dealing with a messy, highly localized storm across the southeast and east coast. Marginal temperatures, rain changing to snow, and accumulations varying wildly from town to town. But longer term, we are entering the most favorable winter storm pattern we've seen all season. The cold is real, the blocking is real, the jet stream alignment is real, and the atmosphere is beginning to bring in the energy needed to turn that cold into snow and ice. Over the next 10 to 14 days, I fully expect at least one major winter storm to impact a large portion of the eastern United States, and there is a very real chance we see more than one. If you live in the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, and yes, even parts of the South, this is the stretch of winter you've been waiting for. And I'll be right here with you, tracking every wave, every trend, every shift in the models as this pattern continues to evolve. Because the weather never sleeps, and neither do we. I'll see you in the next update.